It's 1524, folks, or I don't know, maybe 1525. We are in Wittenberg, Germany, and everything is a little bit bat crap crazy because the Reformation has gone from a religious revolution to a political one. It's quite unpleasant, especially for this guy who, just kind of started the whole thing. Martin Luther. No, not that Martin Luther. This Martin Luther, who was played by this guy in the 2003 film, Luther. Anyway, back to the Peasant Revolt. Everything's just really bad, really crazy, and then all of a sudden Luther literally comes out of nowhere and starts kicking some ass. And then this guy, whose name is Carlstadt, gets all confused as to why Luther is even angry. He's like, hey dude, I'm doing all this killing for you. But then Luther, he gets all alpha and totally rips Karlstadt a new one. And Karlstadt feels like an idiot in front of the crowd, and he leaves the scene doing some random crap and shouting,
"It's the people's work! The people's work! The people's work! The people's work!"
Total idiot, right? And then basically everything just kind of goes back to normal, which is really cool. All thanks to Luther. Isn't that cool? But it's also a giant load of crap. Welcome, my friends, to Ad Hoc History. It's Luther versus celluloid. Well, welcome to what could be one of the more confusing episodes because it's based on such a confusing jumble, but we're going to do our best. Celluloid is film stock, right? So what we're looking at today is how factually accurate is at least this scene in the movie. Well, you might be surprised. You might be surprised at what's accurate and what's not accurate. And we might ask ourselves the question, is there such a thing as meta-accuracy? I just coined that term. Something that is not actually true, but in some ways sums up things better than the truth ever could, at least in a movie. Now, today I have incorporated two things that I don't think have ever been incorporated before. A timeline, sure, but also a thermostat. Why? Okay. Well, as we look at the events between 1515 and 1530, we're going to examine this period in the movie to try to understand what's true or not. And the things that we don't think are true are going to add red to this thermostat. If the thermostat goes all the way to the top, we're going to explode this film. This film is going to explode. It's the people's work, folks, and we have to do it. Now, first, let's get ourselves over to some much-needed context. Okay, so we're going to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. If you want to get this printout, you can get it in the description of this video and maybe cut some stuff out. You might want to get some sparkle glue, stolen from my children. The root of this, we're trying to understand the relationship between Luther and Carlstadt. Carlstadt had been Luther's professor. And when Luther kind of gets going, is an early supporter of Luther. We know that Luther in 1517 goes to the cathedral door in Wittenberg and knocks on the door and puts his 95 Theses on the door. And that this might be the most important document ever nailed to a door in the history of doors and documents. But here is something fascinating for you guys. Guess what? Do you know that 6 months before that, somebody actually took 151 Theses and tacked it to the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral? And do you know who that person was? Can you guess? That's right, Carlstadt. Carlstadt wrote 151 Theses, went to the door in Wittenberg, knocked, nailed it to the door, and I guess no one really, it didn't catch on. It had no zip to it. So just saying, I don't want to psychoanalyze Carlstadt here, but it might have led to some anger issues. Okay, so 95 Theses. Now, in the movie, the 95 Theses is treated like it needs to be treated, right? A couple of people see the 95 Theses, they start reading them, they're going to take it to a printing shop, and they're going to print it. Now, in the defense of this movie, this is a reasonable montage. If ever there was going to be like a montage scene in a movie, I think 95 Theses on door to printing press, out into the world, Catholic Church gets all upset. We really can't fault these guys for being too cheeky with it. But we're going to fill this in a little bit. Let's just give it a little dollop there, okay? Decided to use this glitter glue to make our thermostat. Why not? But a couple years later, excuse me, let's keep those glasses on. I'm gonna need them. Let's make a little bowl here. Guess what this bowl is? Oh man, this is gonna be so creepy. Oh, what are those things coming out of the bowl? Ugh. You know what those are? Worms. Yes, because there's something called the diet of worms. This is basically where the Catholic Church puts Luther on trial. He goes on trial. He's told to recant. He says, I'm not going to recant. And he very famously says, here I stand. I can do no other. All right. Now, this is actually going to lead to a scene in the movie that seems totally, that's right, totally unbelievable. Seems like the worst kind of, Hollywood fake history. So, oh man, am I getting ready? Oh boy, am I going to jam this bread up the thermostat? You just wait and watch for the next part because it's going down, folks. Luther is being conducted back to Wittenberg, supposedly. He's supposed to be given safe conduct, and he's in the middle of the forest, and then all of his guards leave all of a sudden, and out of nowhere, people come and they kidnap Luther. They take Luther and they kidnap him. They put a sack over his head, and then they take him to a castle, Wittenberg Castle, and then they take the sack off his head, and he's like, oh, thank God. I thought the Pope had kidnapped me and was going to kill me, but actually, guess who it is? It's his patron has kidnapped him. Now we got to talk about Frederick the Wise just for a moment here. That's Freddy the Wise, okay? They called him Frederick the Wise. You know why they called him Frederick the Wise? Because he was wise. Without Frederick the Wise, it's hard to imagine that Martin Luther would have been anything but an ink stain on history. And so Frederick the Wise is going to kidnap Luther. And then Rome's going to go to Frederick the Wise and be like, do you know where Luther is? And he's like, oh, no, I don't know where he is. Do you know where he is? Like, I heard he got kidnapped. Did you kidnap him? And the Pope's like, I think you kidnapped him, but I can't really be sure that you kidnapped him. This scene is really cinematic. It's super Hollywood. And I've watched it many times, and I thought, that's no way that's real. That they just made that up in Hollywood. But it's actually pretty accurate. Now, there's one distinction here, is that Luther knew. He knew that Frederick the Wise was going to fake his kidnapping. He was aware of that beforehand. So it's not major. I don't want to be unfair about this because I think it's a pretty cool scene. I mean, obviously you're going to write it into the movie if that happened, but we're going to give it a little bit of red here, okay? Yes, okay, so what comes next? We don't even need this for this section. I really think the movie does a pretty good job with this because 1521 to 1522 is when Luther is stuffed away at a castle, Wittenberg, and he's basically translating the Bible into German. Meanwhile, guess the Reformation's still going on. It's not like the Reformation stops, and in fact, it kind of kicks into a higher gear in some ways. Guess who might really want a leading role in the Reformation? Guess who? Yes, our friend Carlstadt. Now you may have been wondering, Cody, what is this? What's this situation here? It looks like a Yeti. That's what it is. It's a Yeti. And when I've seen this movie many times, and when Carlstadt does the people's work, I've always thought, hey, it looks really like a Yeti. The Yeti is like the Holy Spirit of this whole section. I can't really tell you where the people's work is, but it's definitely, at least in part, in this time. Because with Luther gone, Karlstadt's going to have just the time of his life. Mr. 151 Theses is finally going to have his day in the sun. So what's he going to do? It doesn't sound major, but one thing he does is he decides that he's going to do the Eucharist. He's going to do Mass without vestments on. But you're like, well, it's not that big a deal. It's a big deal. He's going to renounce all academic titles. He basically says they don't matter. He becomes what they call the people's prophet. And he marries a 15-year-old. So there's that. He's really living it up. And the movie does a really good job at this section, really quickly showing how Karlstadt, while Luther's stuffed into the Wittenberg Castle, Karlstadt's taking the Reformation in a whole different direction. He's going to make it very political, but not political in a way that Frederick the Wise would want. Not a kind of political revolution against Rome, but rather a political revolution against Frederick the Wise. And that's going to lead us to the next section. We didn't need red yet, but we're about to head in to some choppy waters. what happens? Frederick the Wise, seeing Karlstadt kind of go crazy and some other Reformation figures, he basically calls for Luther to return. Get out of the castle. Stuff's going down. People are saying all kinds of stuff. I need you to come back and I need you to cool things off. So Luther's going to come back to Wittenberg, right? And he's going to come back. He's like, I got it, boss. I know. You're in charge. I'm going to calm things down a lot. What's he going to do to calm things down? He's going to deliver, very famously, the 8 sermons. Now, the 8 sermons are a bunch of sermons that are basically like, you guys need to chill out here. Like, we're having a revolution against Rome. We're having a revolution against the Catholic Church. We're not removing the church. That's not what's happening. And some people, and I don't want to mention any names here, are really out of control. Everyone knows who he's talking about, right? He's talking about Carlstadt. Mr. Yeti here, this is somewhere in the People's Work. Carlstadt hears about it. He's like, is he talking about me? And they actually have a meeting at a place called the Black Bear Inn, where basically they sit across from a table from one another. And Karlstadt's like, there's 8 sermons. So it kind of sounded like you were talking about me. And Luther's like, oh, really? Is that what it sounded like? I don't know. Maybe. It is not a torch-wielding scene. It's a massively passive-aggressive conversation at a wayside inn. So, folks, I am compelled at this point to boost the red significantly. And I'm going to have to boost this red up, a little bit here. Oh, do you guys feel that? Like a room started to shake. I don't know if this thermostat's connected to Earth, but it's possible. But I gotta be. Yeah. Ooh. That was a little scary. But yeah, that's gonna boost it significantly. But what comes next might boost it even more. Before we can even get into Luther and the Peasants Revolt, let's talk about what the Peasants Revolt was. It's called the Peasants Revolt, and so you would think it might have been a revolt by peasants. It's actually way more complicated than this. I was researching this to do this video, I was coming across images. Check this image out. I'm looking at this image, and I'm thinking, wow, some pretty fancy peasants. Like, wow, some pretty cool peasants. They look pretty fancy. Good-looking wives. They got some nice suits of armor. That's because they weren't really peasants. People who led the Peasants' Revolt would probably be compared to like the bourgeois class. It's actually kind of wealthy landowners and miners that lead the revolution, this revolt. And Luther's dad was that kind of person. And so was Karlstadt. Karlstadt and Luther's dads were like, they weren't an aristocracy, they weren't nobles, but they were wealthy. And what would happen from time to time in Germany is that every once in a while, the aristocracy and the church would raise the rates on land and also try to implement Roman law. And then the peasants, meaning these kind of wealthy landholders, would push back, and there would be some kind of agreement. But this is what makes the Reformation so fascinating, because the Reformation isn't just one thing. It's not just a religious thing. It's a political, economic, religious, social thing. Now, with the Reformation going on, they can say that they're not just upset about high rents. They can say, oh, it's not Christian. Catholic Church shouldn't even be here. Okay, and it's going to lead to the Peasants' Revolt. So that's just the context for the Peasants' Revolt. And yeah, it's going to get really bad, and partly because the Reformation emboldens these wealthy peasants to get the poor peasants, and things are going to spin out of control really quickly. And when they spin out of control, you know what everyone is going to want to know? Whose opinion matters the most in all of this situation? It's not Frederick the Wise. It's someone else. It's Luther. What is Luther's reaction to the Peasants' Revolt? Well, I don't know if you noticed this before, but my image of him, Photoshop, gives him 2 faces. Well, that's relevant. Initially, when the Peasant Revolt is happening, he says both sides are to blame here. And the peasants take that as somewhat an approval of what they're doing. They're like, well, see, look at Luther. He says some of our complaints have merit. He's not just taking the side of Frederick the Wise. But then I think someone goes over and talks to him, honestly. Someone goes and talks to him and says, don't forget where your bread is buttered. And I think part of his success is that he always knew how important his patronage and his protector, Frederick the Wise, was. and he makes a conservative pivot. Now, he gives it theological reasoning. He says, listen, actually, you peasants are out of control. But he says, you have to stop. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? This is what Jesus says. Hey, stay out of politics. But it's going to embolden the princes to put down the Peasants' Revolt in a serious way. Now, we're in trouble now. The movie's in big trouble, okay? Just shows Luther is not approving of the violence. But it's going to be significant in terms of veracity of the movie, right? The celluloid is starting to, ooh, man, this place is shaking now. Oh, boy. Yeah, it's getting, oh, my God. Guys, this is dangerous. I'm starting to feel like the roof's going to cave in. And, oh, by the way, very first frame of this movie is this. Thrivent Financial for Lutherans. That's who put money behind the movie. Now, listen, I get it. You know, biopics are propaganda. I understand, but you know, it does make me want to pull out the red pen just a little bit, okay? And yes, hang on, because we're getting very close to the explosion of this movie. I hate doing this, man, and I feel like in the process of doing this, I might actually, because this thing is getting just wild in here. It's just help. Oh my God, but I can't stop myself. But hold on. Yes, hold on. Do you guys seriously think I'm going to blow up this movie? Something I probably should have told you at the beginning. I love this movie. I think Luther is a great film. How can you not love a movie that has a scene like that in it? I mean, look at this. I mean, it's so cool and campy and fun. Let's remember, it's made for high school kids, basically. Now, interestingly enough, later in the movie, Carlstadt shows up again. And it's kind of funny because Luther's in bed with his wife, and then someone throws a rock at the window. Guess who throws the rock at the window? Karlstadt. Karlstadt, last time we saw him, he like pushed the guy and said the people's work. Next time we see him, it looks like he hasn't changed his clothes and has wandered in from the forest, which is kind of accurate too, I have to say. It's not exactly accurate, but like Karlstadt was an interesting guy. He kind of goes away with his wife and then tries to do farming for a while. I don't know if it's like artisanal farming or whatever. Then he actually goes back to Luther, and Luther gives him a place to stay for a while. They kind of mend their ways, but this scene is really funny to me. Basically what happens is that Karlstadt throws a rock at Luther's window and says, hey, this other guy is getting burned at the stake. It's kind of like the filmmakers were like, we gotta find a way to tell Luther that this other guy's being burned at the stake. Oh, really? Is that guy who played Karlstadt around? We can use him. And I just gotta say, the guy who played Karlstadt is a genius. You know, Ralph Fiennes, is it Ralph Fiennes? Or is it his brother? I can't remember. Who plays Luther? That guy's a good actor, but I don't actually think he's like Luther. He's way too sanctimonious to be Luther. He's way too fragile to be Luther. Luther was wild. He was a wild man. I don't think he had like the kind of crises that the Luther in the movie has, which could put the thermostat over, but we're not going to do that. We're in a safe zone now. So Karlstadt comes back, throws a rock at the window, and then the movie just seems to like want to finish itself. Like, I don't know if they ran out of money or what, but it just feels like the movie's like, I feel like the director's like, we gotta get off this set. And they do, like, really quickly. And they like summarize like so many years, a bunch of Luther's walking with his wife, and then a bunch of horses show up on a ridge, and then this guy, who I could never totally figure out who this guy was. I could find him on Wikipedia if you want, if anyone cares. This guy goes galloping up, waves up documents, says, Luther, we did it, which also could put the thermostat way over red, but we're not going to do that because we love this movie. It is
the people's work! The people's work! The people's work!
Okay, homework. If you haven't subscribed yet, you gotta subscribe. Some of you guys haven't subscribed. I'm gonna fail you for the year. You can follow us on TikTok, okay, the TikTok. And then Instagram, if you guys did your notes, you wanna post your notes, why don't you post them to #AdHocLuther, okay? I'd be curious if your notes are cleaner than mine. I bet that they are. And then really for your real homework, let's shuffle the deck, right? Make a list. I don't even know what that means, but that's your homework. Make a list. Could be anything. and we'll see you next time.